I sat in the front pew of the church, my hands folded neatly in my lap, staring at the polished mahogany coffin at the altar. My mother lay inside, a woman I had spent my entire life trying to impress, a woman who, in the end, had made it painfully clear that I was never enough. Tears pricked at the edges of my vision, but they weren't for grief. They were for closure, the kind I knew I would never truly get. Beside me, my sister Olivia sniffled dramatically, pressing a lace-trimmed handkerchief to her eyes. She had always had a way of making everything about her, even now. When the priest finished his final blessing, Olivia let out a soft, pitiful sob and leaned against her husband, Connor, who wrapped a comforting arm around her. She looked perfect, as always, her designer black dress hugging her figure just right, her blonde curls falling in elegant waves. Even at a funeral, she managed to be the center of attention. I swallowed the lump in my throat and glanced toward the second row, where my aunt and uncle sat stiffly, avoiding my gaze. The rest of the family did the same. They all knew. They had all known. I had prepared myself for what was coming. I had told myself I wouldn't care. But nothing could have prepared me for the lawyer's words after the service. "I'm sorry, Mandy," Mr. Holloway said, adjusting his glasses as he flipped through the pages of my mother's will. "Your parents left everything to Olivia." A cold numbness spread through me, and yet my voice remained surprisingly steady. "Yes." He hesitated, then added, "Your parents believed you were independent enough and didn't need financial support. Olivia, being a stay-at-home mother, required the assistance more." My nails dug into the fabric of my dress. 3 properties. A husband who made 6 figures. Luxury cars parked in her driveway. And yet I, the one who had worked my way through college, juggled 2 jobs, never asked for a dime, had been deemed unworthy. "That's ridiculous," Aunt Marlene muttered under her breath, finally breaking the tense silence. Olivia didn't look surprised. She simply let out a delicate sigh, as if this were just another unfortunate burden she had to bear. "I mean, it does make sense," she murmured, placing a hand over mine as if to offer comfort. "You've always been so independent, Mandy. Mom and Dad just wanted to help me. That's all." I pulled my hand away. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She bit her lip. They may have mentioned something before." And there it was, the truth. I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand, how even in death, my parents had found a way to remind me that I wasn't good enough. But years of being the overlooked daughter had taught me one thing: anger wouldn't change anything. So instead, I smiled, because if they had thought I was independent before, they had no idea what I was truly capable of now. I turned to the lawyer. "Thank you for your time," I said smoothly, standing and gathering my purse. "But I won't be contesting the will." Olivia's brow furrowed. "Wait, you're not mad?" I gave her a long, measured look before tilting my head. "Oh, Liv," I murmured, stepping close so only she could hear. "I don't need their money." Her shoulders sagged in relief, misreading my words for surrender. I turned on my heel and walked out of the office, my head held high, my smile quiet but sharp. What Olivia, and nobody else, didn't know was that I had already prepared my own final gift for our dear parents. And it would be unforgettable. I hadn't always been invisible to them. At least, I don't think I was. There must have been a time, maybe when I was a toddler, clutching at my mother's skirt, babbling nonsense to my father, when they saw me. Really saw me. But as I grew older, the difference between me and Olivia became impossible to ignore. She was the golden child, the cherished daughter who could do no wrong. I was the afterthought. It started small. When Olivia won her first dance recital at age 6, my parents threw a party complete with a cake shaped like ballet slippers. When I placed first in a spelling bee that same year, my mother patted my head and murmured, "Keep up the good work, Mandy." When Olivia turned 16, she got a brand new car, wrapped in a big red bow. When I turned 16, I got a used bike, her mother's words echoing, "You don't really go out much anyway, Mandy." I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need approval, admiration, or love. But deep down, it stung. I worked hard while Olivia breezed through life on charm and parental favoritism. I built something for myself. I worked my way through college with 2 part-time jobs. I landed a stable career in finance. I saved every penny, invested smartly, never relying on anyone. And yet, in the end, none of it mattered. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words over and over in my head. Your parents left everything to Olivia. Of course they did. Why would I expect anything different? My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. A message from Aunt Marlene. Mandy, I just want you to know I think what your parents did was disgusting. You deserve better. A second message appeared almost instantly. You should fight this. Contest the will. It's not fair. I laughed, bitter, hollow laughter. Fair. Nothing about my relationship with my parents had ever been fair. I had accepted that a long time ago. But what I couldn't accept was Olivia sitting there, pretending this was just another inconvenient burden. Pretending she hadn't known. I didn't want their money, but that didn't mean I wouldn't leave my own mark on their legacy. I pulled open my laptop and logged into my email. There was someone I had been waiting for. I needed to reach out to a certain lawyer. A week later, I found myself standing in front of my parents' house, no, Olivia's house now. The air still carried the familiar scents, freshly cut grass, the faint trace of my mother's lavender perfume embedded in the walls. But it wasn't home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. Olivia answered the door, her face lighting up in mock surprise. Mandy. I wasn't expecting you. No, of course she wasn't. I need to pick up some things, I said simply. Mom had some personal letters and keepsakes I'd like to have. Olivia hesitated, her expression flickering for just a moment, then she stepped aside, waving me in. Of course. Take whatever you need. I walked through the house slowly, memories pressing against me with every step. The living room, where I had watched my parents shower Olivia with praise, the dining table where I had sat in silence while they gushed over her latest accomplishments. I headed toward my father's old study. This was what I had come for. I pulled open the desk drawer, my fingers grazing over old documents, notebooks, and letters. And then I found it. The original copy of my parents' will. I had already seen the version the lawyer had read aloud, but this was different. There on the first page, was a clause that hadn't made it into the final document, a clause stating that my parents had intended for their estate to be split evenly between Olivia and me. A slow breath escaped me, my fingers tightening around the paper. So Olivia had done more than just accept the favoritism, she had changed the will. I turned, heart pounding. Olivia stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression calm, almost bored. You weren't supposed to see that, she said. I stared at her, waiting for an explanation, a confession, anything. Instead, she just shrugged. Mom and Dad always intended for me to have everything, Mandy. I just made sure their wishes were properly carried out. I had never hated her more. I could have screamed. I could have fought. I could have marched straight to a lawyer and exposed her for what she'd done. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Thank you for your honesty, I said, my voice steady. That's all I needed to know. And with that, I walked out of the house, already planning my next move. Olivia had just made one very big mistake. She thought I would let this go. She thought I was the same overlooked girl she had always dominated. But she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The truth had been sitting right there, buried in my father's desk, waiting for me. My parents had intended to split their estate between Olivia and me. But Olivia had made sure that never happened. She hadn't just accepted her role as the golden child, she had taken everything, ensuring I walked away with nothing. She thought I would do what I had always done, accept it, swallow it, move on. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I spent the next week planning. I could have gone straight to a lawyer. I could have dragged Olivia into a courtroom. But lawyers slow things down, courts drag secrets into daylight where they can be muddled, delayed, dismissed. And Olivia, careful, precise, had almost certainly covered her tracks. This needed a different kind of precision. Something surgical. Something that would hurt in a place the law couldn't touch. I needed the right accomplice. I found him in a downtown bar that smelled of old whiskey and cigarette smoke, the kind of place where people folded themselves small into booths and pretended the past was only a dim outline. Connor looked up when I slid into the leather across from him, surprise flickering across his face. Mandy, he said, setting his drink down a fraction too carefully. What are you doing here? I folded my hands on the table, keeping my voice low. I know about the will. His whole body went still. For a second I thought he'd bolt, call Olivia, disappear like he always did when things became real. Instead he rubbed a hand over his face, and let out a slow breath. You knew, he asked. It wasn't a question. I leaned in. Olivia changed it. I found the original in Dad's desk, she erased me. Mom and Dad meant for us to split everything, Connor. She made sure that didn't happen. He stared into his glass, not surprised but not at ease either. I had my suspicions, he admitted finally. Olivia, she runs everything. Finances, accounts, the house. I don't ask questions anymore. Of course he didn't. Olivia had always been the one steering the ship, Connor had been content to let her set the course. I didn't want his pity. I wanted utility. I'm not here for the money, I said, quieter now. I never was. I want her to pay for what she did. Connor's laugh was a short, disbelieving sound. Olivia always wins, Mandy. She's untouchable. Not this time. I watched the skepticism fade into something else, curiosity, maybe, or the flicker of a man who'd had enough of being decorative. Because I know something she doesn't. Over the next week I peeled back Olivia's perfect life with the patience of someone unbothered by noise. I didn't care about ledgers or tax forms, I wanted what hurt in private. I wanted proof of the lie beneath the pearls. Late one night, scrolling through a past I'd pretended not to care about, I found it, a vacation photo from 3 years ago, Olivia in Italy, sunlight on her shoulders, laughing with a group of friends. Connor was not among them. A name caught my eye on a tag, David Carlisle. I clicked. The profile unfolded like a map, comments, tagged nights, late-hour banter, flirtatious threads that ran for years. Private jokes in public places. A careless intimacy buried in captions and heart emojis. Olivia had not only been unfaithful, she'd been sloppy about it. When I took that to Connor, the way he looked at the screen was the closest thing to betrayal I'd ever seen on his face. It wasn't just the affair, it was the revelation that the life he propped up with his loyalty was a carefully curated stage, and he, the prop. He swallowed. She lied to me, he said. It was barely a whisper. Exactly, I said. And liars can be exposed. I don't want to ruin him, if that's what you're thinking. I want her to lose the thing she values most, control. You want your dignity back, don't you? Maybe even some peace. Connor exhaled, a breath that loosened something inside him. What do you want me to do? A slow, satisfied smile formed. Play your part, I told him. Be the stunned husband. Be the man who finally sees. Let her believe she still has the upper hand, until she doesn't. He hesitated, then nodded. It was imperfect, shaky, and utterly human. It was also everything I needed. Olivia had been careless in one arena, passion. And passion leaves footprints. I planned to follow them. Carefully. Quietly. Relentlessly. She'd thought she'd taken everything. She hadn't counted on me finding the one place she couldn't quite sterilize with polish and charm. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. This was it, my first move. The beauty of revenge isn't always in the grand gestures. Sometimes it's in the subtle unraveling, the quiet collapse of a carefully curated life. I drafted a message to Connor. No words. No explanation. Just screenshots. The reply came almost instantly. Where did you get these? Does it matter? I typed back. You deserve to know the truth. A long pause. Then, meet me tomorrow. We need to talk. I smiled. Checkmate, Olivia. The next evening, I met Connor at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. He was already there, hunched over a cup of coffee, staring blankly at the table. The moment he looked up and saw me, I knew he had seen everything. I slid into the chair across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with something fragile, anger, disbelief, maybe even relief. How long? He finally asked, voice hoarse. I exhaled. From what I found, at least 4 years. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Of course he did. He lifted his coffee, but his hands trembled too much to take a sip. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," I said. And for once I actually meant it. "No, you're not," he said, eyes locking on mine. "You wanted me to know. You wanted this to happen." I didn't deny it. "Yes. But only because Olivia deserved to be exposed. She's been playing everyone, Connor, you, me, even my parents, right up until they died." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "And now, what? What do you want from me, Mandy?" I leaned forward. "I don't want your money. I don't want your sympathy. I just want to watch her world fall apart." Connor studied me for a long moment. Then, "I want a divorce," he said finally, voice steady. "And I want full custody of the kids." It was a bold, calculated strike. Olivia had spent years curating the perfect image, a loving wife, a devoted mother. Connor was about to rip it away. The next morning, I watched from a safe distance as Connor's lawyer delivered the divorce papers to Olivia's doorstep. She answered the door in a silk robe, hair perfectly styled, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. But the moment her eyes fell on the envelope, her expression twisted into something ugly. I wished I could hear her reaction, the shock, the panic. Instead, I watched as her fingers tightened around the papers, knuckles white. And then, just for a moment, she glanced around, not at Connor, not at her kids, but at the neighbors. She cared more about what they thought than the fact that her carefully constructed life was crumbling around her. Classic Olivia. I should have walked away after that, let Connor handle the rest. But I wasn't finished. Olivia still thought she could control the narrative, that she could manipulate her way out of this. The way she always had. She was wrong. That evening. I made sure of it. With a few precise clicks, I compiled the proof of Olivia's affair, screenshots, messages, pictures, and I didn't send them to Connor. No, that would have been too direct. I sent them to her entire social circle, mommy group chats, the charity board, even the homeowners association. Everyone who mattered to her. The fallout was immediate. Olivia's phone exploded with calls and messages. She tried to deny it at first, spin some story, claim a misunderstanding, but there was too much evidence. By morning, she was a pariah. The friends she had spent years cultivating now wanted nothing to do with her. For the first time in her life, Olivia was alone. The thing about people like Olivia is that they never believe consequences apply to them. They lie, manipulate, twist the truth to fit their version of reality. They believe they're untouchable, that no matter what they do, life will always bend to their favor. Not this time. I made sure of that. A week later, Olivia was spiraling. Her once loyal friends had abandoned her. The school moms whispered behind her back at drop-offs. The charity board, where she once reigned supreme, had asked her to step down. And worst of all, Connor had moved out, taking the kids with him. She had lost everything. But Olivia wasn't the type to go down quietly. No, she still had one last move to play. I was at work when she called. I debated ignoring it, letting her stew in the chaos she had created. But curiosity, and a faint desire to hear her unravel, won. I answered on the third ring. "You ruined my life," she hissed, her voice raw, almost unrecognizable. "No, Olivia," I said calmly. "You did that on your own." She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think you've won?" "I don't need to win," I replied. I just needed the truth to come out. Silence hung on the line for a long moment. Then her voice dropped, cold and dangerous. "You don't understand, Mandy. You think you've taken everything from me? Fine. But you better watch your back, because I have nothing left to lose." And with that, she hung up. A normal person might have been scared. But I knew Olivia. She was all talk. Still, I didn't let my guard down. She had lost her reputation, her marriage, her perfect image, but there was still one thing left, the house. I didn't need the money, but I needed to finish what I started. I called Connor. "Do you still have the original will?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, confusion in his voice. "Why?" I smiled. It took a few more weeks, but eventually my lawyer filed the case. Olivia had fraudulently altered legal documents, a serious crime. There was more than enough proof, and with Connor's statement, she didn't stand a chance. The court ruled in my favor. My parents' original wishes were reinstated, which meant half of everything, including the house, now belonged to me. I'll never forget the look on Olivia's face when the sheriff showed up with the eviction notice. "You can't do this," she screamed, voice shrill with rage. "This is my house." "Not anymore," I said, my voice calm, steady, and satisfied. And just like that, the girl who had once seemed untouchable learned the most important lesson of all: no one is invincible. I stood in the doorway, taking it all in. "You took everything," I said, voice steady. "Everything from me, Olivia. And now I'm just taking back what was mine." She was shaking, hands clenched into fists. Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered, eyes wide with desperation. I tilted my head, letting the smallest trace of amusement slip into my expression. "I guess you'll have to be independent now." Then, with the sweetest, most ironic smile I could muster, I handed her one last gift, an old, used bicycle. The same kind my parents had given me for my 16th birthday. I turned and walked back inside, shutting the door firmly behind me. For the first time in her life, Olivia had no one to fall back on. And for the first time in mine, I was finally free. The house was quiet. Truly quiet, for the first time in years. I wandered through its halls without feeling like an outsider. No judgmental stares, no whispered comparisons to Olivia. This house was mine now, not just on paper, but in every way that mattered. And yet, standing in the grand living room, surrounded by expensive furniture and meticulously curated decor, I felt nothing. This place had never been home. It had been a battleground, a monument to everything I had been denied. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do next. The very next day, I put the house on the market. Not for profit. Not for revenge. But for freedom. This house had been Olivia's kingdom, my parents' shrine to their perfect daughter. I wanted no part of it. I watched from a distance as the "for sale" sign was hammered into the lawn. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I was winning. Olivia, on the other hand, wasn't faring so well. Mutual acquaintances told me she was struggling. Connor had full custody, and without him to bankroll her lifestyle, her carefully constructed world unraveled quickly. The last I heard, she was renting a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, working a low-level job she despised. There was no safety net, no parents to bail her out, no adoring social circle to prop her up. She was finally living the life she had always looked down on. And yet, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt done. The money I had inherited from my parents' estate. I donated most of it. Not out of spite, but because I had built my life without their help. I didn't need their wealth to define me. I kept just enough to start over somewhere new, a different city, a different life, one where I wasn't Mandy, the forgotten daughter. Just Mandy. A week before I left town, Aunt Marlene invited me over for dinner. She had been the only relative who had truly stood by me through everything. As we sat at her table, she reached for my hand, smiling softly. "You know," she said, "your parents were wrong about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? They always thought you were the one who didn't need them," she continued. "Too strong, too independent. But the truth is, they needed you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "They built their entire world around Olivia, because Olivia needed to be propped up. Needed their validation, their money, their constant approval. But you? You thrived despite them. And that scared them." Her words settled deep inside me. Maybe she was right. Maybe my parents hadn't ignored me because I wasn't good enough. Maybe they ignored me because they knew I didn't need them the way Olivia did. And for the first time, that thought didn't hurt. That night, as I packed the last of my things, I took one last look around my old room. The girl who had lived here, who had spent years trying to prove herself worthy, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had nothing left to prove. I picked up my bags, walked out the door, and never looked back. Because my past didn't define me. My future did.